it were up to me, Peter Schweizer would be getting the Pulitzer Prize. But then again, honest journalists do not. Peter Schweizer, the Republicans so far under Mitch McConnell in the Senate, have pushed for a massive omnibus spending bill and to get it done before Christmas, before the Republican majority takes over in the House. So he'd rather cut a deal with Pelosi and Schumer than cut a deal with the Republicans. You've got a move for massive amnesty with Tom Tillis and Kirsten Sinema. That's gotten the green light from McConnell as well. They just passed an anti-religion act. It's not a pro-marriage act. It's an anti-religion act, so that any religious institution that raises objections to same-sex marriage won't have a leg to stand on and can be federally charged. They already voted under McConnell, many of the Republicans, for increased gun control, and the Democrats say it's not enough. And McConnell and 18 other Republicans voted for hundreds and hundreds of billions in another infrastructure bill. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, this guy McConnell is not a leader. He is a deal maker. He is not a conservative, even though he's backed by pseudo-conservative media platforms. He, in his 15 years as Republican leader, great, he's been good on judges. Well, any Republican leader is going to be, quote-unquote, good on judges. And then he trashes Trump. He used to trash the Tea Party, talks about quality candidates, when in fact rhinos lose all the time, and we apparently don't have a lot of quality senators. Is this the Mitch McConnell that you wrote about, that you know about, Mr. Washington, Mr. Let's Make a Deal, Mr. I'm interested in promoting myself?
Yeah, it is, Mark. It's great to join you as always. Yeah, I mean, here's the irony. You know, Mitch McConnell's criticism of Donald Trump and those people that supported McConnell was what? That Mitch McConnell is the principled conservative. Look at the things you just mentioned that he signed on to. There's nothing conservative. There's nothing principled about any of them. And this is really Mitch McConnell's trajectory. I wrote about his ties, his family's financial ties, to the Chinese government. And it's illustrative here, Mark, because it's the same thing as it relates to China policy, as it relates to all these other things. He says things that are right. He will say things about China that, oh, yes, we've got to be concerned about China. But you look at his leadership position while he's been in the Senate, we've had these two massive, massive issues we've faced. COVID. Right? We all know that it originated in China. Since that happened in January of 2020, has the U.S. Senate, even the Republicans in the Senate under Mitch McConnell, have they passed a resolution? Have they passed legislation? Have they pushed for even studying the origins of COVID? More than 1 million people have died. We don't have a 9/11 type commission on this. We should. The main reason we don't is because in the Senate, Mitch McConnell has never pushed for it. Think about that. 1 million Americans have died, and Mitch McConnell has had no apparent interest in trying to figure out actually what happened. I mean, I think we all know it was a lab leak. We know the Chinese government covered it up, but still, you need to investigate these things, and you need to hold China accountable. Look at the other big issue we're facing, fentanyl. Every single year, more Americans die than the combined casualties that we suffered in Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, and Iraq. Every single year, that many Americans are dying of fentanyl overdoses. And these are not like heroin addicts. A lot of people dying think they're taking Xanax or maybe they're smoking marijuana, and it's laced with fentanyl. So these are people that are dying not even knowing they're taking fentanyl. We know that 90% of the precursor chemicals that go into making fentanyl come from China. We know that Chinese state-owned companies are producing it. They're shipping it to Mexico. They're doing deals with the cartels, and they're shipping this poison across the border in the United States. Has in the U.S. Senate, the Republicans in the Senate, under Mitch McConnell's leadership, have they done a single thing to raise legislation, to even study the issue, to hold China accountable for what they're doing with fentanyl and the Americans that are dying every year? Absolutely not. And when I look at that, Mark, I look at the entanglements. I look at that his family's business, his in-laws, who, by the way, his father-in-law sent him a gift of some $10 million about 10 years ago, made Mitch McConnell a very wealthy man. It's a shipping company, Foremost Shipping, and they struck a deal years ago with the Chinese State Shipbuilding Corporation to have all their ships built by the Chinese government. They have those ships financed, the construction financed by Chinese state banks to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. The crews on those ships are all Chinese, provided by the government. And many of the goods that they ship around the Pacific Ocean come from Chinese state-owned ship companies. That is precisely the reason you're seeing no action on China. And that, by the way, is precisely the same reason you see this unprincipled leadership on the things you talked about earlier. Mitch McConnell has always been about talking and saying certain things, but when it actually comes to pushing and fighting, he's never there.
You know, it's just so shocking to me. And let me say this to you. I would like to carry you over the break here.
Okay.
I notice that almost day after day goes to the microphone, and no matter what the issue is, he's trashing Trump. Now, I know he has animus towards Trump, but there's something else going on here. And I think he wants to, as best as he can in his own mind, drive up the negatives even further on Trump, drive down the support for Trump, and make it much, much easier for the corrupt Biden Department of Justice to indict Trump, sending signals, if you will, in effect, to the Department of Justice that the Republican leader of the Senate is giving you the green light. I would like your opinion on that when we return. Welcome back, America. I'm here with Peter Schweizer. So my thinking is, Peter, that there's a reason why McConnell keeps going to that microphone and pounding Trump. There's a reason why Chris Christie does it. There's a reason why Asa Hutchinson does it. There's a reason why Larry Hogan does it. There's a reason why the Wall Street Journal does it, and National Review does it, and all the rest of them. But certainly in the case of McConnell, he's sending a signal to the Department of Justice, which is the most political Department of Justice in modern history, that as far as the Republican leadership goes, go for it. You'll get him off our back. As far as they're concerned, he's a cancer in the body politic. Go ahead, take him down, take down the people around him. Do it for us. We just as well get this over with, too. So I actually think that's what's going on right now. What do you think?
I think in McConnell's case, you're actually absolutely right. Look at people that like McConnell or dislike McConnell. One thing they all agree on, Mark, I think you and I would agree on, too, he's very calculating. Mm-hmm. You know, his nickname is the Turtle because he kind of looks like a turtle, but he's also very calculating. And when he is talking about Trump, you'll notice he's not just giving sort of a football analysis. He's using very precise legal terminology. And I think you are correct that when he is giving a press conference, the audience is not really his constituents back in Kentucky, who I think probably, like Trump, voted for Trump. It's not even the national media. It is the Department of Justice. And look, if the Biden administration wants to confirm Supreme Court justices, if they want other issues passed in the Senate, there are things that Mitch McConnell could do to make their life very difficult. So if Mitch McConnell's signaling it's open season on Trump as far as criminal charges,
so you agree with me?
I do agree with you. And all you have to do is look. I mean, it wasn't the case of criminal cases, but look when Mitch McConnell was leading the Republicans in the Senate in the majority when Donald Trump was president. It was sort of lukewarm support for issues, and he always worked to try to gut or maneuver the legislation in a way that he wanted it. He's never really liked the Trump agenda, and I think you're right. The audience he's speaking to is the Department of Justice.
Yeah, because I'm sitting here thinking about this. What he's doing is very odd unless that's what he's doing. And you're right. He's very calculating. He uses words very carefully. He's quite monotonous and boring, but that's what he's doing. So he's made it clear to the special prosecutor. He's made it clear to the Attorney General of the United States publicly by his constant attacks on Trump that go ahead. It's open season. I'm convinced of this, and I'm convinced it's not just him. I'm convinced it's some of the Republicans who are vying and don't have a shot
Sure.
at being nominated for president of the United States. This is the Republican establishment really, in their own way, working with the Democrats who control the federal law enforcement instrumentalities of the government, working together in their own way to say, okay, the time has come, get rid of this guy.
Yeah, and I think the question that everybody needs to sit and consider, and I think we know the answer to it, is what's Mitch McConnell? Take Donald Trump out of the equation for a second and just look at the agenda. Replace Donald Trump with Ron DeSantis. Do we believe that Mitch McConnell has a more positive view of Ron DeSantis than he does Donald Trump?
No,
I don't think he does. And so this is when people talk about a one-party state in Washington, D.C., that a lot of what you see between Republicans and Democrats on Capitol Hill is kind of professional wrestling, right? They're pretending that they're beating each other up when they're not. This is a clear-cut example of this. And, you know, I've spent a lot of time studying American history, especially 20th century American history. I cannot think of a time, even during the height of Watergate or White Watergate with Bill Clinton, I cannot think of a time when a elected Republican leader was so negatively talking about somebody who was the recent standard bearer of their party and talking about it in very specific legal ways, which almost seemed to be sort of rolling out the red carpet and say, yeah, if you want to indict him, indict him. I mean, it's that blatant in my mind and that dangerous in my mind.
And yet why are we the only ones to even notice this?
Well, I think part of the problem in the Senate, and this is an example, you've talked about this quite a bit, Mark, about the lack of profiles and courage in the Senate. I ask this question all the time. Why is it that Mitch McConnell keeps getting elected as leader? He's not inspiring. He's not a visionary. He doesn't get things done. And part of the reason is money. He has a stranglehold on some of the big donors to the Republican Party. He's able to raise a lot of money, and we saw in the last election cycle, what does he do? It's not about raising money to put the Republican Party in the majority. It's about using the money to build his own political fiefdom. So if you don't get in line, you might have a chance to win in your state, but I'm not going to, pour this money. So he puts together, hundreds of millions of dollars in money that he raises, and you've got senators who are scared. They're scared to buck him because they're afraid that they're not going to get the financial support. And that, to me, is an indictment not just of Mitch McConnell, but of these senators who are spineless and won't stand up to the sort of destructive behavior that he's engaging in. Mitch McConnell, his tenure in the Senate, in my mind, has been essentially a policy of organized retreat. You try to get a little concession from the Democrats, but basically you keep moving the goal backward and you keep allowing them to advance. And that is what Mitch McConnell excels at as a Senate leader.
And he's been able to build on your point, he's been able to use the office of a quote-unquote leader to empower himself. You might recall, I think it was a snuck-in language in the Obama bill or something like that, is my recollection, to massively increase by tenfold the amount of money that could be given by these dark money contributors to these leadership PACs. I think it was like $35,000, and then they increased it to $350,000 or something along that magnitude, which is him. Now, Schumer can do it too, but he's able to outraise the Republican Party. He's able to outraise any other campaign. He's able to throw $30 million at a candidate. He's able to throw $9 million against a candidate in Alaska in order to help build up Murkowski and withhold his funds from other people and so on. And then he blames the losers for not being good candidates, or he blames the Tea Party, or he blames Trump. He never looks in the mirror and never takes responsibility for anything.
No, he doesn't. And this financial machine that he's built, Mark, is this sort of reinforcing machine because, a lot of those big checks, $350,000 or more, some of them are being written by big supporters that support the Trump agenda, America First, et cetera. A lot of them are not. A lot of them are, corporate America, Chamber of Commerce types who also, by the way, they cut the $500,000 check to Mitch McConnell. They're writing a $500,000 check to Chuck Schumer's leadership PAC at the same time. And so it's a way of Mitch McConnell capturing that money, because most of the money for, the MAGA America First portion of the party comes in small donations. So these big checks go into Mitch McConnell, and then, of course, he is advancing their agenda against what most Republicans out in America want him to push for. So it's self-reinforcing. It makes him more establishment. It makes him more beholden to the Chamber of Commerce types, but it also gives him a very powerful tool that he can wield against people that are going to dissent. And I mean, that's the iron here, by the way, Mark. We're talking about Twitter and we're talking about censorship. Mitch McConnell doesn't censor, but he absolutely squelches dissent in the Senate, which is remarkable in my mind how he does that, and he uses money as his weapon.
And notice he never leads on these big issues, whether it's Twitter, whether it's the border, you talk about China, any of these things. He'll go to the floor, mumble through a 15-minute speech somebody wrote for him, and that's that. And because I think your point is very important, these forces that put money into his coffers, and this guy, Stephen Law, you ought to look into him, former Commerce Chamber of Commerce, this guy who's his who is his point man. These entities that give him all this money, they don't want leadership. They don't want somebody who's going to push hard against the Democrats and push back. They don't want somebody who's going to threaten to shut down the government if things don't begin to work and so forth and so on. They want a guy who's going to meet on the 40-yard line. They want a guy who's going to be bipartisan. And that's why when he's asked, what's your legislative agenda, he doesn't have one.
Yeah, because there's no money in principle, Mark. And you're quite right. You mentioned Stephen Law. There are others. The apparatus of the Republican Party, many of the political consultants, even they might be working for the RNC, the main political body. But because Mitch McConnell raises so much money, what does that money go for? Well, sometimes he'll send $10 million to a campaign. What he'll do a lot of times is he'll buy ads on television. There are huge fees to be made, $15, consulting fees made by these political consultants that work for the RNC for these media buys. So they fall in line with Mitch McConnell. So think about that, Mark. You do a $10 million media buy, there's a $1.5 million fee for these political consultants off the top that end up in their pocket. So you've got the money flowing in, you've got his ability to squelch dissent, but he's also got this army of political consultants that work for the RNC. They're supposed to be advancing the Republican Party, but they want their palm greased. They want the contracts, and they know that Mitch McConnell can raise lots of money. So you know what? We want to fall in line, too, and do what Mitch McConnell says as well. There's really very little resistance within the Republican Party establishment because you don't make money resisting Mitch McConnell, and that's the tragedy in what's going on.
It really is shocking. I mean, it's very difficult to break through this kind of a stranglehold that he has in the Senate, and that these senators are so weak. I mean, if you challenge him, you come under attack. You can see the leaks to the liberal media, Politico and the New York Times, the Washington Post. For all they say about McConnell, they will do his bidding, won't they?
They absolutely will. Look, I believe, Mark, that all it's going to take is one or two senators to really step forward, and I think that he will collapse like a house of cards. I don't think he's that popular with his colleagues. I don't think he's respected by his colleagues. I think you think of some of those in the Senate that are seemingly principle-driven. That's where the energy is in the party. What you get from Mitch McConnell is sort of the old established way that can be lucrative for some people, but all it's got to take is for a few people to step forward and say, this is outrageous. And by the way, talk in very explicit terms what's going on. The money flow, who's making money, who's getting rich with this established direction, and ultimately look at the failures of the Republicans in the Senate. What have they accomplished? I mean, you mentioned at the beginning, they said, they got some justices through, but that's what any Republican Senate leader is going to do.
Yes.
It's the bread and butter what they're supposed to do. It's all the other stuff where it's been an abject failure. It's nothing. There's nothing proud here for Republican senators to look at, and it's my hope that we're going to have a couple of profiles in courage step forward, challenge this, and that will change things.
You know, I mean, is he really better than Trent Lott was? Is he really better than Bob Dole? As a matter of fact, I would argue Bob Dole was a pretty damn good Republican Senate leader.
Yeah. He was.
Not a big conservative, but he was tough, and he could communicate to the American people. I mean, Mitch McConnell can't even go into Republican states and campaign. He's so despised.
No, you're right,
Peter. Listen, I want to thank you very, very much for your courage and your insight and your knowledge on this subject. I just want the people to be aware of this. It's nothing personal with me, but this is a big, big obstacle to achieving anything. His name is Mitch McConnell. Take care of yourself, brother. Have a Merry Christmas and a great New Year, too.
Same to you, Mark. Thanks again.
All right, man. He is great. Great.